Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Welln'ish. Today we have another amazing guest, Dr. Erin O'Loughlin. Erin has a Ph.D. in exercise and health psychology. She's also a naturopath and has her precision nutrition certification. She wears many hats. She's a health coach, a researcher, a mom of two, a ringette coach, and a brownie leader. We're very lucky to have her here to discuss her take on diet culture from a research perspective and also her perspective as a mom of two girls. So I'm beyond excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for the very nice introduction.
So education is super important for me. And so I'm so excited to have you here is because there's so much info out there on wellness and fitness and eating. And it's so cool that you have the psychology aspect of it too. And it really seems like the people with the biggest platform or the biggest voices or the people who are the most influential and important are people who have a big social media clout, which doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with someone like yourself who is like probably overqualified to be doing what she's doing. You know, you're extremely well educated, and a lot of what you do, I'm guessing, goes hand in hand with what you're learning. And there are some damaging messages that I see out there that can be harmful. So I'm just excited to have you here to see, you know, somebody who really has that strong research backing to get their take on diet culture, the wellness world, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is that it seems like the wellness world is kind of piggybacked on diet culture, and it's just like, oh, are you taking your vitamins? Are you doing this? It's just, and it's become overwhelming. So
yeah,
anyways,
wellness is the new diet culture. Everything is in the guise of wellness. Like even Weight Watchers, which is a diet, now is like a wellness diet, right? So
yeah, it's really, like it's self-care for you to count your calories.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just wild. Okay, so yeah, can you speak a little bit about the evolution of your career? I find it fascinating. Yeah, just how you got from, naturopath, you're also doing, you also help with fitness coaching, health coaching. So just kind of all the training you've done and where it's kind of led you.
Yeah, so hopefully I don't ramble on for too much because it's quite a history, but I actually met my husband and got my first postgraduate, post-BA degree in business, which is funny because I really didn't like it, but I'm the kind of person like, okay, I need to finish it. And I guess it was serendipitous.
Exactly why I finished my marketing degree. I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I have to finish.
I have to finish, exactly. So, but I mean, at least I met my husband there, so that's good. And then, so kind of between, stages in my life, I knew I didn't want to continue in business, whatever that means, right? Marketing, finance, all that kind of stuff. I started working for my mom. So my mom is an epidemiologist at the University of Montreal. So I started really kind of low on the totem pole. I was doing the data collection, calling people saying, can you answer my survey, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was always really interested in physical activity and getting active, and I was always a very active person through sports and gym and whatnot. And I was always kind of the person roping my friends into being active. I'm like, what? We throw on a video and do it at like an ab workout, or let's go for a run and stuff like that. And my friends was begrudgingly oh, God.
I am this person. This makes me so happy to hear.
So it's really funny. So I started recognizing that about myself. And so while I was working in research, kind of seeing what it was like, in that sense, I started getting my personal trainer's degree, certification, various things from various places. I didn't know what was a good kind of certification back then. I'm not knocking any of them that I got, but I was dipping my toes in there. And then through my work, I got a contact at McGill University, Dr. Catherine Sabiston, and I started telling her, I love physical activity, but it's really hard to get people motivated, and it's really hard, and I was telling her all these issues, and I'm like, I think I want to continue with school, but maybe I need to go back into kinesiology and learn about physiology and the bones and the structure and all that. She's like, you want to go into psychology, behavior science, so to speak.
So interesting.
So anyways, long story short, I started my master's at McGill under Dr. Catherine Sabiston. And I worked with breast cancer survivors, helping them, encouraging them to become more active, and through a trial, through Curves. I don't know if you know what that is. It's an old gym where you would do like circuits.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I remember
I don't
that.
think it exists anymore, but we partnered with them, and and we did our trial, and I wrote up my thesis about that. And then I ended up doing my Ph.D. at Concordia, and I became really interested in active video games, so like Pokemon and the Wii and all that. So that's kind of where I veered, but with the lens of like what motivates people to do those types of activities.
Yeah.
And then full circle, I'm now back at with Dr. Sabiston at the University of Toronto, again working with women diagnosed and treated for breast cancer. And we're running a trial with them, focusing on resistance training, because there's a lot of evidence to show that women in general improve their body image when they start to weight lift. Especially for reasons of getting stronger and kind of body functionality rather than body composition changes. Really see like this clicking of appreciating the body more when resistance training is the primary focus. So
absolutely.
That's education. And coaching wise, during the pandemic, I don't know, I guess like a lot of people, I was inspired. I was working from home, but I was like, I'm gonna do something different. So then I got my precision nutrition certification. So I'm not a nutritionist, so to speak. I guess I can call myself a precision nutritionist, not a dietitian. So I don't work with any special populations, like anyone who's pre-diabetic. Well, I can work with pre-diabetics, but like anyone diabetic or have special dietary requirements, I refer them out. But so I'm doing what I call health coaching, and that'll probably come up a little bit more, so I won't get too much into that.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
And that's just like another point that you refer out, whereas I don't see any of these like influencers ever talking about their limitations. And I think that's such an important,
so important
aspect to talk about.
It's like, just on that note, just because it's something that I talk about a lot, just because someone looks good or they themselves have lost weight doesn't make them an expert on the topic. It makes them an expert of themselves, but not of you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I might run off of that a little bit. So talking about your research, so that's so interesting to me, the behavioral and the psychological motivators. And do you find that you're able to directly apply some of the things that you learn to your clients, like getting them moving? And who would you say is kind of your niche clientele, and what are the major, like the common things that you see that you help? I guess I'm just assuming maybe specifically women, but how do you get them moving again? Or
so of course, like a lot of the stuff I try to translate from my research to my practice. I think that's why people actually come to me, because like it's not that they see me on Instagram in bikinis, because I don't post myself on Instagram very often. They kind of hear through the grapevine, like she has maybe a different approach than you're used to. And it's definitely applicable to real life, but it's very individualized too, because oftentimes with these research projects that we have, it's very, we use data. It is not individual data. It's like population-based data or a sample. So we kind of have, on average, when we do this, this happens. On average, when you do this, that happens. So that's like can be applied to people in general, but when you comes right down to it, you're an individual. So I kind of intervene on an individual level. And in terms of motivation, of course, so I did my master's and PhD with the theoretical underpinning of the self-determination theory. So it's a widely known theory. I don't get into it too much, but you can apply it to everything. But basically, motivation is on a continuum. And you have like amotivated, so whatever the behavior is, let's say physical activity, like you're just not there at all. And then there's externally motivated, and as you go along the continuum, it goes to internally motivated to kind of self-determined.
Yes.
So with physical activity, we see that people who are more on this side, self-determined, intrinsically motivated, are those who sustain physical activity and they have an easier time integrating it into their lives. And those who are externally motivated, kind of come in and out of physical activity. So for example, an external motivation would be weight loss. So you have a weight loss goal, you start exercising more. Let's say you lose weight, your reason to exercise is kind of gone. So you stop exercising.
Yes.
And then an internal reason could be more like you identify as an exerciser or a person who is active, or you want to ameliorate your health and you truly believe that what you're doing is helping your health, then you'd be more on the internal side, and that is related to sustainable physical activity. And of course, it's a continuum. You are not one or the other. You can be externally and internally motivated. You just want to be more on that side in general.
And so what are some tools how do you get someone to not switch, but basically, because I'm just thinking as myself and like my peers at the time, a lot of like athletes, for example, once your sport is done, you don't want to work out anymore because the goal was I'm training to become a hockey player so that I can go play D1, or I'm training for an athletic purpose. So how do you reinstill that into someone who, let's say, is more extrinsically motivated? Like, what are some practical tools people can use to?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I don't specialize in sports psychology, but from what I do know,
it was just an example, but any sort of
no, for sure. And I'll try to like keep it general because I can't speak necessarily to athletes, but I do know that it is hard for a lot of higher athletes to transition into becoming a regular person. And part of that is because they really identify as this athlete. And when that identity is taken away, it can really affect their mental health. And I can draw a parallel to someone who, let's say they have lost weight and they're starting to get a lot of compliments about their weight loss, and they're starting to kind of really internalize that thin ideal, like, I'm more worthy because I'm in this smaller body. I am like of value because I am the ideal of beauty in our society. So you have the athlete and like that thin ideal.
Yes.
And let's say they inevitably gain the weight back, which usually happens, or the athlete's identity is taken away. One of the things that I would work on with my clients is starting to kind of take away the value of those things in their life. It doesn't mean they have to completely disappear, but like, who are you if you are not in a small body? Who are you if you are not an athlete? And let's start to develop those other areas. So I actually do a lot of work with my clients to figure out what their values are. Like, if you have a list of values, what are your top 3 here? And are your behaviors in line with those values? And that's usually where they start. It's kind of like an aha moment. Like, I'm so much more than just this collegiate athlete. Like, I am a friend. I am a sister. I am a child. I work as a waitress. I have an education. Like, so much more. So it starts to crowd out that identity, where they stop to focus on that piece of the pie a bit less, which is one of the first steps.
Very interesting. Yeah. I feel like I'm psychologically analyzing myself now, because exactly that. It was after I stopped playing hockey, I felt so lost. Like, I feel like it was maybe the first time where I felt a little bit of depression in my life. And I was like, why? It was because now I had 1 3-hour class a day, and I no longer had that identity of like going to the gym. And so I was a bit on the opposite spectrum. I was like, I need to go to the gym and like fulfill like some sort of duty. And then I found CrossFit, and it was like the competition of the gym. And it was like just another form of like trying to fulfill that athletic identity. And then like once I got injured, it was like the real time where I was like, you need to figure out who you are without this, because it's not working for your body. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's okay. Like it's nice that you transition from hockey player to CrossFitter, or, to kind of fulfill that. It is a part of who you are, but sometimes when it's our only focus, so going back to the appearance, or the person who might have lost a lot of weight, you might not have cared so much about your body, but then you started getting so many compliments on it. Yes. And then we call that an over-evaluation of appearance. So it's like, I'm nothing without my body. Like, that's what some people really start to think when they get a lot of this positive affirmations about their body. And it's a hard thing to get out of once you're there. That's why weight cycling happens. Okay.
And so for people who don't know, I don't know if this is the same, but as we studied our little nutrition course, it's called yo-yo dieting. So what is your take on why they don't work? And
So, well, I just want to like kind of introduce, like, I'm not actually I'm anti-diet, but I'm not anti-weight loss, because I believe in body autonomy. So someone has a right to do what they want with their body. So I just want to say that overall.
Yep.
But most of the time, I don't necessarily like. There are some populations who might benefit from the habits that lead someone towards losing body fat. But for the most people, dieting can actually lead to detrimental effects like physical and mental and yo-yo dieting. So yo-yo dieting usually is when you lose weight very, very quickly for an external reason like a wedding or a photo shoot, or I don't know, something triggered you to want to lose weight very quickly. Then you crash diet. And then there are like physiological, psychological, emotional reasons why you come back up. And usually what we see is after a crash diet, there's like an overshoot of weight because your hormones are dysregulated and your hunger hormones and your fullness hormones are kind of out of whack. So it's like you might feel like you did before, but you're hungrier now because your body is kind of wanting to keep you in homeostasis. So, was that answering your question about weight cycling?
Yeah, I think so.
And actually, it's interesting because weight cycling, the number one predictor of weight gain is dieting, which is mind-blowing.
Really?
Right? But it's because we see this weight cycling, and in each time you rebound up, you tend to put on a little bit more and a little bit more. And because you've crash dieted, you've likely lost lean mass, so your muscle and stuff like that, because you're not resistance training, you're not eating enough protein, et cetera, et cetera. And then so when you rebound up, it's more of a fat gain than a muscle gain because muscle's hard to gain. So
absolutely. Like I know we spoke about how how eating disorders aren't necessarily your specialty and you'll refer out. But I definitely had that experience. You know, at one point in my life, I thought I was being extremely healthy by being extremely restrictive. And it took a long time to come out of that. And I think back to that a lot. And I really do feel strongly that I shot my metabolism at that point, because I was like the person who could eat anything. And then suddenly, and I mean, I've never gained an incredible amount of weight, but it's just, that has always stuck with me, that what I did to my body at that point, where I was being fed information where it was like, the more restrictive you are and the more you exercise is the healthier you are. When I look back, I'm like, that was awful. And it really does shoot your metabolism. And it takes, like in my case, I really think it took years before I could get back to a like balanced homeostasis. And I don't think people realize that is that I remember in one nutrition class that we took, it was if you change your diet by 500 calories or more, and a lot of yo-yo dieting, it will be that because people go from extreme.
Exactly.
Your body goes into starvation mode. Like it's, I don't know if you agree with that, but
actually, so starvation mode, I know what you're talking about. Starvation mode is usually confused with something called metabolic adaptation.
Okay.
There's actually no such thing as starvation mode, because if you think about it, someone in like a concentration camp, or if you think of someone who's actually starving, like it doesn't actually really exist. But your metabolism is, but I know what you mean. Like that's what everyone talks about. It is called like an adaptive, like your metabolism is very adaptive to your behaviors, to your lifestyle. So what you're saying is that like when you don't feed your body properly, there are mechanisms in place to keep the weight on, which is actually, I encourage people to think of that as like a miracle, because we're freaking lucky that we have these like mechanisms in us, because we were able to evolve and still be here. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't. So, and also the thing with starvation mode is, when people go very, very restrictive on their diet, they feel constantly restricted. So there's a difference between restrictive mindset and actually restricting calories. So there are people who are like, I've been on this diet for so long, I just don't lose any weight. They have a restrictive mindset, but they're not actually in a caloric deficit. So when you're in this restrictive mindset, maybe you are kind of eating in a caloric deficit 5 days of the week, but then you compensate on the weekend and you're actually just on maintenance, or you're in a surplus. So that's when they think like, maybe I'm in starvation mode because I'm always starving, but I'm not losing weight. But actually, like if they look at their kind of week as a whole, they're not in a caloric deficit.
Yes. Oh, that's very interesting. So the term for that, what was the term that you called it? The
metabolic adaptation.
Metabolic adaptation. Okay. Noted.
Yeah. So like, for example, when you lose weight, if you don't do it in a, the right way, so to speak, you do lose lean mass, which can lower your basal metabolic rate, right? Because you have less muscle. Yes. Or it can play with your hormones, leptin and ghrelin, so it can suppress leptin and increase ghrelin. So ghrelin's your hunger hormone and leptin is your fullness hormone. So the body does little sneaky things like that. There's more mechanisms. I can't remember them off the top of my head at the moment, but that come into play that are like, like, let's stop this. I don't like this right now.
Okay. Super interesting. So what does balance look like for you? What do you try to teach your clients? Yeah. What are the principal teachings that you try to get them to have a balanced lifestyle or something that is a common thing that you're trying to teach each person that comes your way?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really, really individual.
Okay.
So it really depends on when a client comes to me, they've usually been dieting or they have a restrictive mindset and not actually have lost any weight for years and years and years and years. So usually for them, I would hone in on their relationship with food. So what that means, on a basic level, is like, how do you feel about food? And one of the most common things is like, there are good foods and bad foods. So like, for example, kale is good and McDonald's is bad. So when I eat McDonald's, I need to feel ashamed, or it's a treat or a cheat, for example. So we try to, and what happens with that is like really put certain foods on pedestals. Like, I cannot have this food in my house because I will binge on it. So you've kind of created this food, this scary food in your life because it's labeled as bad. And then like you feel superior and morally better as a person if you eat good food, right?
Yes.
So that is not helpful either in terms of your relationship with food. So we try to kind of work on that too. And often I will work on the binge restrict. And I say binge in the sense where they, like, not clinical binge eating like to a point where they're past fullness, where they eat when they feel kind of sick about it, like, or it's not in line with their goals and their values. So again, like the weekday diet and then the weekend binge, we work on kind of like making that consistent throughout the week. It doesn't mean you can't have a drink or a dessert on the weekend or whatever, but fit those drinks and dessert during the week too, like kind of taking the weekend off of its pedestal as well, and eating on a regular schedule. So oftentimes my clients will be like, well, I don't eat a lot in the day and then I stuff myself at night, and then they kind of feel guilty in the morning, so they restrict again during the day and then they stuff themselves at night. And it's kind of the same cycle. So I try to work on them for that cycle. A lot on hunger and fullness cues. If you're my age, your chances are you've dieted for like on and off for 20 years. I'm 40. And your hunger and fullness cues are likely ignored, especially if you've practiced like intermittent fasting, where you literally eat by a clock and you ignore your body's cues. You might have a wonky like relationship, like, when am I actually full? When am I actually hungry? And people struggle with that. So we work on that as well. And this isn't me knocking intermittent fasting or people that don't eat breakfast because they're naturally not hungry. Those are different types of people. But if you've kind of trained your brain and your body like to be like, oh, I can't eat until like it's 12 o'clock and you're like starving by 11 and you've ignored that for months and months and months, you might not recognize what starving is anymore because you've learned to ignore it, right?
So what are some cues that you teach your clients for that? Like, how do you go about breaking that cycle and relearning?
Yeah. So actually what I get a lot of my clients to do is, so I don't typically prescribe macro tracking with my clients, or calorie counting in the least. I actually encourage my clients, I take a weight neutral approach to my coaching. I never ask my clients their weight. We do not monitor weight. It's not something of interest. I don't monitor waist size. I don't do before and after pictures. It's really like an approach based on like habits and behaviors.
Okay.
So if someone's kind of coming from a calorie counting world and they're scared to let that go, I use an app called Just Ate. It's an awesome app where you just literally take a picture of your food. That's it. You take a picture, and then within the app, you can rate like, why did I eat? I was hungry. It looked good. You know, it gives you kind of options.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Were you full after? So it's kind of like prompting those questions. But then I also will do an exercise with my client where they tell me when they feel full and when they feel hungry, or at least in the past, mentally and physically. And then we start kind of practicing those cues. And I also use the hunger and fullness scale, which there's many different versions of this. You can just Google it if you want to find the one you like the best. But basically, we work on not getting too hungry, where the point where you're hangry and you make decisions kind of not in line with your goals and your values. And then stopping when you're full. And this can be really difficult for a lot of people. And it's a lot of trial and error. And of course, you can overeat. There's nothing wrong with that. When you have like a birthday cake and like you're not hungry, but like it's damn good, you can have it.
Yeah.
But like in general, people feel their best, let's say the hunger and fullness scale is like 1 to 10. They feel, their best after a meal around the 6, 7, 8 mark, right? Mm-hmm. So we work on that as well.
Okay. That seems like a very simple, accessible tool to. Isn't that crazy though, that diet culture has done this to us? We literally don't know when we're full. We've been told that it's like good to feel hungry. We've been told that, you ignoring your body cues is actually XYZ. It's some reason that just enables the diet culture message to spread even more. It's just
perpetuate. Yeah,
it's just hilarious. Like that you actually have to sit here right now and break down. Like, we don't know when we're full.
I know.
Don't eat when you're completely full. Like, it's a message that you need to learn and train. We need to train ourselves. It's wild.
Well, and you're actually like born with your hunger and fullness cues, right? Like a newborn will stop breastfeeding or bottle feeding when they're full. Yeah. Or my kids, for example, I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. They don't typically overeat. They often leave a lot of stuff on their plate because they trust their bodies. Mm-hmm. And we kind of lose the trust with our body, exactly with my example, like, I can't have X, Y, and Z in the house because I'm going to like just explode and eat it all. There's a disconnect with the trust that you have. So that's something else that I would work on with my clients, is kind of, I know this is like a lot of words I'm spewing at you. It's through journaling and discussion and self-awareness. And it takes time and it's practice. And actually, like, especially if you're like my age or older, it's something that you will probably struggle with for the rest of your life. And I tell my clients that all the time. Like, you might start reverting back to your old quote unquote ways of thinking, good food, bad food. But what matters is you have the tools to get back to where you were after, or you have what I call it the going to body image, like a body image shield. Like, So again, with my clients, we do work a lot on body image, and that can look very different depending on if you want to work on negative body image or fostering positive body image. But there's going to be body image threats all the time. Comments about your body, what you see on social media, making you feel bad, comparing yourself, all those types of things. So we work on body image resilience, and that can mean many things. And I'm probably going around and around, and I don't know where I am anymore.
Talking about the body image. So what are some psychological tools that you've given to clients to help with that? And I guess if you could look at it from the 2 different categories that you just mentioned, then I find that interesting.
Well, contrary to popular belief, negative body image and positive body image are not as highly correlated as you think. And positive body image is not necessarily related. Well, neither of them are actually related to your body size. So you can be the thin ideal, but also score really high on negative body image. You could be in a larger body and score very high on positive body image. Right. And that kind of stat blew my mind when I started working in the field. Well, I wouldn't say I work in the field, but started learning more about body image. And I guess intuitively I understood that, but I always thought like, what you see on social media, all these like thin, white, tanned, blonde women, they must be so happy because they look and all the clothes fit them and everything, but it's not related at all. So, so when someone comes to me and they want to work on their body image, which I highly encourage for most of my clients, there are many different kind of areas to target, and the research on these types of interventions are very baby, like they're very in its infancy. So I can't give you like a concrete example, like this works 100% of the time. No. But one thing that is really super, super promising in the literature for these types of interventions is body functionality. So starting to remove the the aesthetic, the what you look like kind of reason to have a body, and start replacing it with feelings of what your body can do for you. So for example, we will do exercises on like, okay, aside from what you look like, what does your body help you do in terms of senses, like see, touch, feel, smell, those types of things, in terms of how you interact with the world, hugging, playing sports, walking, going outside. And just so I will make my clients make lists of these different types of bodies, a bit different types of ways that the body functions. And it starts to kind of open your eyes to like, okay, my body is more than just like an aesthetic thing that is like to be objectified and to be looked at. Yes. My body's so much more than that. And that is actually a very powerful tool to start implementing with people.
Okay, interesting. And how do you get them to start internalizing that? Like you mentioned journaling before. Is that something that goes into it, or?
100%. I mean, right now, that's the kind of interventions we have. Okay. Yeah, there's a specific one. What is it called that I use often? I think it's called the Working Alliance intervention. And it's actually just 3 questions. So I'll give them 1 question a week about body functionality. And what they've done is they've tested this empirically. They've given in different samples in different women. Normally with women, there's more and more body image literature with men, but it's starting. And just with that, you see with the scales that have been developed, you see large improvements on body image scales, like in the direction you want it to be in. Like, you know, just because you might not like how you look, it doesn't mean you can't appreciate certain things that your body does for you. And that's kind of where we want people going. It's not, I love the body positivity movement. There's so many good things about it, but it's really unrealistic for everyone to be like, I love my body and how I look every day. Like, that's not for everyone, but everyone can start appreciating, like, my hand helps me hold a loved one's hand. Like, my fingers help me do art. I do that one with kids, actually. Like,
that's really cute.
Yeah, like, because like I said, I'm a brownie leader, and we had this exercise, like, what does your body do for you? And it was so telling. There was one girl, it was so enlightening. They're 8 years old, they're brownies. And I said, other than what you look like, tell me what are some things your body does for you or that you like about your body. And one girl, she already said, 8 years old, she's like, there's nothing I like about my body. I need to lose weight. And I was like, it took everything out of me, like, not to start crying. But luckily I knew her and I know her background. And I was like, well, I know you love art. So what do you paint with? And she's like, my fingers. I'm like, I know you like ballet. What do you dance with? And she's like, my feet. So you could see the lights start happening. Okay, maybe there's some things about my body I can appreciate.
Well, that's why I feel like your work is so important. And I wish that every single person who is thinking about going on a diet or would also have a psychological perspective, because like you just said, it's a cycle. And it took a prompt for her to even fathom that something other than what she looks like or her waistline is important. And that's sad, but I think it's the reality for most people. Oh, I hate my body. Oh, do you hate that you breathe every morning? Do you hate that we don't even think about those things because there's been such an emphasis and microscope on our appearance.
It's like the objectification of women. And I don't really know the politics of it, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I've started to see these messages more and more about how dieting keeps women occupied with that stuff so we can advance with the other cool stuff that humans can do, our careers and science and, being an astronaut and stuff. If we're too worried about, or even being politicians, if we're worried about our size and what we look like, we're too distracted to do those things. I mean, I have to think about that messaging more, but I thought it was a really interesting perspective on diet.
That's an insanely interesting perspective. Like, I feel like you should, if somebody has one of those timers on their iPhone, just every day press it when you start thinking about like damaging thoughts about your body or like shame about the food or the exercise that you didn't do, because I'm very hard pressed to think of a single female friend that I have who we don't talk about these things with. Like, it's a daily occurrence, and that's such a simple way to put it. It's like, this is occupying so much of our time that we could be doing elsewhere. Oh, that's infuriating.
It's infuriating. Like, I remember, like, so in my early 20s, I was on this like weight loss journey, and I started doing Jillian Michaels, the queen of diet culture, like her videos and stuff like that. And I would spend hours, and I'm not kidding you, hours at work researching recipes, like lower calorie versions of this, meal prepping, meal timing. And of course, like, that was a lot of time of my life, a lot of time of my life.
I know.
And I could have used that to do something else.
I feel like that in my 20s too. I think about that so often. Like, what a waste of time. And it's just so weird for me now to step out of it and look back. And I see friends now who are only starting to like hop onto the like diet culture and shaming themselves. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I'm there for them, and I try to support them as best as I can. And I totally understand why they're having these feelings, because it's shoved down your throat every day. But I'm like, I'm so grateful that I've gotten out of that cycle. Like you said, I think it's always going to be something in the back of our minds. You don't ever escape it. But I don't like, it just, wow, it was a long time to have those like recurring thoughts. And every Monday, I'm feeling horrible about what I ate. My diet starts today. Like the amount of times I've said that in my lifetime, it's just, it's
going back to like what I said about body autonomy, and I'm not anti-weight loss, but when a client comes to me and one of their priorities is weight loss, we go through the check, like, how's your blood work? How's your cholesterol? You know, all those physiological kind of check boxes that you want to make sure are you're doing well in them, right? So if they're fine on that level, then we kind of question, like, I do the 5 why exercise with a lot of my clients. So I ask them, okay, what's your goal? And this is just a general example. I want to lose 20 pounds. I say, why? And then they'll write it down. Because I want to fit in my jeans and I want to look good in my bathing suit, for example. Why? So you say why to that kind of response. Because last year I went to the beach and I didn't want to take off my shirt or play with my kids and I missed out. So I don't want that this year. Okay, why do you want that? Like, why do you want not to miss out? Because I want to live a full life and I want to be a good example for my kids, and I want this, for example. Okay, last time. Why do you want that? Because I want to lead a fulfilling life. I want to accept myself, and I want, so it goes from like, I want to lose 20 pounds to I want to be fulfilled and live a long, happy life where I'm accepting myself. So then I ask the question, like, do you need to lose weight? You're healthy. Do you need to lose weight to have a long, healthy life and accept yourself? Like, is this really going to get you that? And people are like, mind blown. Like, I don't need to lose weight to like be healthy. And I'm like, not necessarily. If you're telling me your markers are good and your habits are, more or less in line with the guidelines to be healthy, then no, you don't.
So then I guess that would come back to what you were saying about encouraging the functionality.
Yeah, well, it encourages looking at your health habits from a real actual health lens than a weight loss lens. I can't tell you the amount of times I've worked with a client or someone who doesn't want to exercise because they hate exercise, because their belief is that they have to do HIIT, running, like all these, high calorie burning exercises. And it's not knocking them. If you love them, go for it. Like I do some of those things myself. But the fact of the matter is that many of them don't, because they don't like it. They don't like the feeling. They don't like the time it takes, whatnot.
They've probably been shamed at the gym not felt good there.
Traumatic experiences. So they're like, well, I'm not going to exercise because it can't look like that. If I go for just a walk, I'm not burning any calories. What's the point? And so a lot of the work I do is actually shifting that focus, like, okay, weight loss can be a goal, but let's encourage you to look at physical activity, for example. It's always a non-negotiable for me. I'm like, okay, we don't have to change your nutrition too much,
Yeah.
You need to find a way to get your body moving in a way that you like, because there's just way too many benefits of physical activity.
And so many options that can
So
be
many
fun.
options.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a walk, okay? And I'll actually like bring up PubMed or Google Scholar and go on the studies and like show like, look what this many steps translates to in terms of mortality, translates to in terms of cancer prevention, transfer, like walking is not just walking. Walking is fantastic for your mental health too. And then I'll bring up those studies and I'll show them and I'll tell them to test it themselves. You feel like lethargic, you feel like whatever, go for a walk. Let's see how you feel after, and I'll like test them on it,
Yeah.
The best evidence is your own anecdotal, right?
So that's such a good point. And I think a lot of people realized that during the pandemic. It forced people, the classic going on my stupid walk for my stupid mental health.
Mental health. I love those, the reels and the TikToks.
They kill me. But a lot of people were saying, either they didn't have gym equipment or they weren't feeling motivated at all. So, they just went on walks. And once you have the Apple Watch, you're like, it's crazy. Yeah. I'm actually burning as many calories as me doing my like deathly hardcore HIIT training that I normally would have done. And my joints aren't sore. I'm sleeping better. My appetite is better regulated. And it's like, my doctor told me my whole life, just go for a walk. And I'm like, you're just not hardcore enough. You don't get it. Like, you don't get physical exercise. And and now I'm like, God damn it. He was right. Go walking. Like, why don't we give that message more often?
Well, I mean, that's funny because public health, and I mean, I'm not a public health expert, but I do work in public health, like at UWM. At the SEAP I work with a lot of public health researchers. And the messages are out there in terms of guidelines and stuff like that. But it's just not as sexy as the Instagrammer with her green juice in her bikini. Like, exactly. It's not as sexy. Like, so.
It's also like there's always a bit of a distrust, and people like with clout and with voice always try to poke holes in the government issued things. But, if you actually really did follow them, you would only benefit. Like our nutrition teacher was telling us, like, every single thing that goes into creating what is it?
Canada Food Guide?
Canada Food Guide, and, if we actually ate like that, I think a lot of people would be healthier than they are now, rather than being like, I got to do keto and, God knows what it's going to. Exactly. Like, I don't know. And I'm not a researcher, so I don't even try, but I don't think it's the worst diet out there either, compared to a lot of these ones that are probably, causing a lot of metabolic and hormonal issues.
I mean, I'm just spewing out a number here, but it's a lot. But I remember looking at the Canada's Food Guide that I do have issues with, but that's not the point of this podcast. But it's, there are, I think, like 300 references for that guideline. Yeah. And so it is well researched. And we're researchers, we're not politicians. So as much as people like to clump us together, we're not. But what's interesting with what you said is like, there's this distrust with the government. So when the government says to exercise, there's kind of this distrust about it, or whatever messaging they're hearing. But they'll trust an influencer who's trying to sell them something because they look good. Like, that is mind-blowing. Yeah. Like, buy my protein powder and my, whatever de-bloat seed crap. And
a lot of it's like, get there faster. And then, it's so true. That's so funny. Why do we trust? Yeah.
I know. Yeah, during the pandemic, there was a lot of like messaging, like, and this, I don't want to like obviously get into it about like debates about vaccines and public health measures. But, like, how can the government push vaccines? How can the government do all these things when the number one thing for our immune system is to exercise and eat better and all this stuff, which, like, I'm not disagreeing with that. But if you listen to Participation, who has been around since the 80s, Canada's Food Guide, everything you learn in school, these messages have been told to us. Don't act like it's surprising that physical activity is good for your immune system. You're just not doing it. So therefore, government's trying something else.
That's what I tell a lot of people. Obviously, I'm in alternative health, so I get a lot of people shitting on doctors all the time. And I like, they never talk about prevention. I'm like, your doctor has never told you to walk and to exercise. I'm like, every single doctor I know leads with that, starts with that. But then if your blood pressure is still high, that's a risk for a stroke. Obviously, they're going to medicate at that point. They're not
100%.
trying to dupe you and to get, none of them are getting paybacks from, the pharmaceutical companies in Canada. At least I don't know how it works in the States, but it's just, that's what they lead with. But they don't have the time like a health coach does to really deep dive and guide you through it. And people forget that, they actually did tell me to eat better and exercise, but I didn't have like the motivating factors. I never went to the psychology of it. I didn't have a trainer. I didn't find something that I liked, or anyways. That's a good point.
Just giving someone information usually doesn't elicit action. There's a lot more behind it. And like, for example, like how often have you heard someone say like, I gotta drink more water?
Yeah, here I am drinking my...
Well, yes, exactly. Have our water. But then the next time they're like, I gotta drink more water. It's like tumbleweed goes by. They never drink more water. But it's like, did you put a plan? Did you think about how you were gonna drink more water?
Yes.
When? It sounds like an easy thing to do, drink more water. Changing habits and breaking habits are arguably harder, but it's a process, and it can take a lot of time, planning, effort, and being flexible and compassionate with yourself when you go off your plan or your kind of whatever you've planned for yourself, and be like, I didn't drink water for a week, but I'll try again next week. Because what really matters is the consistency of a behavior over time, not that you've done it perfectly. And that is like a really big mind block for a lot of people when it comes to their health habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just don't ever see the examples of that. We only ever see the quick change that can happen now. And it's, like you said, it's a hard process that involves your mind, involves changing your life, which is impossible for it to happen overnight. Yeah.
And when going back to the body image and how I encourage my clients to develop kind of a positive body image, or at least reduce negative body image, is curating your feed. This is so bloody important. Like curating what you see on Instagram, and that also takes soul searching and kind of this internal dialogue. Like if you find yourself stopping at someone and comparing yourself, and there's upward comparison and then like downward comparison, kind of not that much, like, okay, we're the same. But like if you find yourself comparing either way, it could be a sign, like just mute that person or delete them. And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's not that they're a bad person. It's not that you're a bad person. It's that the images that you're seeing, you're comparing yourself to. And it's not healthy. I have like curated my feed. I see people of diverse races, genders, body sizes, and everything. And I love it. It makes me feel so good when I look at other people living their best lives, like that don't look like the ideal. And I'm learning so much more about like different cultures and different traditions and different types of food too, because obviously I follow a lot of food people. So I learned to see how people eat differently in different parts of the world. And whereas like maybe 5 years ago, my feed was literally like Whitney Simmons lookalikes. Nothing against her, but I don't know if you know who that is.
No.
Okay. She's a Gymshark athlete. If you know what Gymshark is, they are.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have like wicked clothes, but literally all their models look the exact same thing. There's like Nikki Blackadder, these twins, and Whitney Simmons, blonde, short, tanned, like, but the toned look. Well, where they're like muscular, but not too muscular. Like you don't want to look like a power lifter, right? Like,
yeah.
So they all look like that, and that was what my feed was. And of course, I'm gonna feel like crap when I'm like comparing myself. It's not their fault, but I needed for my own mental health to block it.
It's so interesting because, I often try to encourage people that I see to just take a quick note of, did this image make me feel good or bad? And I think just that tool will help people feel better, have less shame throughout the day. And also what's funny is that, a lot of these health influencers who are posting on social media are saying like, I'm doing it because I want to inspire others. When it's like, you're inspiring them through shame, because when they see your ripped abs or you drinking your smoothie and not seeing any of like the hardships of your life, they're just feeling like shit.
I feel like there's a shift happening though. There's, like people are noticing this, people are talking about it, like you and I are talking about it now.
Yeah.
So some influencers are taking more responsibility
Yes.
because I mean, at the end of the day, they're allowed to show their bodies if they want to. They're allowed to show
Yes.
their abs too. And it's sometimes up to but I guess the real question is like, why are they showing their abs and why are they showing their bodies? Like that's kind of a social and cultural thing that we need to start changing. But as an individual, it's like us to be like, these messages aren't for me. Like I want to look at someone living their best life in a body that looks maybe more like mine. And that makes me feel good, not looking at someone that doesn't make me feel good.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's all about body autonomy, and nobody should be telling you what to do with your body, and people can post whatever they want. And but exactly, you should just be able to, I think people should just be conscious of their feelings when scrolling and being able to feel comfortable. I always feel I'm so pro mute button. I use it all the time.
Oh yeah, big time. I have a friend who does like these bikini contests, and when she's going through prep, I always mute her because I'm like, I can't stand seeing this disordered eating, which is normalized through these competitions. And look, I don't want to say everyone that does bikini competitions or wellness competitions have eating disorders or disordered eating. But it's funny because in the body image world, research world, we want to research them and talk to them and evaluate their mental health and their body image. But it's hard to get them to agree to our research because I think at the end of the day, they know they're using these competitions as a reason to have their eating disorder or practice disordered eating because it's normalized in their world.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it's very triggering. Like, oh, well, she's doing that. Maybe I should. But then I'm like, no, mute. Let's move on,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's really, you feel it coming back in every once in a while. And it's like, oh, yeah, I need to take control of this because there will always be a narrative out there wanting to bring you back.
But that's actually part of having a positive body image. Is that, like I said before, you're going to have body image threats all the time, whether it's a comment on your body, comparison to your body, social media, all the things that kind of threaten our positive body image. What happens when you cultivate a positive body image is that you're able to stop, recognize, and have a course of action when they happen, rather than, for example, before I maybe started working on this myself, I could have compared myself negatively to someone. I gotta eat. I gotta go on the diet tomorrow. I gotta restrict. Like it elicits some sort of like need for action right away. So that would be my response to a body image threat in the past. But now that I've worked on my positive body image, I can be like, okay, Erin, you thought you looked damn good yesterday. Okay, like you felt good in those jeans. It didn't change that much
overnight.
2 days. Right now, you saw that image, you compared yourself negatively. So I can talk my way out of it, and I can be like, tomorrow you're going to put on those pants and you're going to feel good again. Or like next week, because oftentimes our body image is linked to our cycles.
Is that something you found in research?
Yeah.
Really?
It's definitely linked to your cycle, for sure.
Okay. When would you say is peak, positive body image?
I think when you are, I don't want to butcher it, so I don't want to answer the question, but I do know like the PMS time and the times so typically we see bloating as being, when you're bloated, you have more, higher negative body image, which people tend to report more bloating around kind of like ovulation, which is interesting because you're actually more attractive to the opposite sex when you're ovulating.
That's what I was going to guess. Oh, people are probably most positive at ovulation.
Well, yeah, so that's it. So I don't want to butcher it because I'm not as well versed with that, but I do know, PMS can trigger bloating and tighter pants, and plus we have cravings, which are true. And some women actually do need a few more 100 calories in order, during their cycle, like their period cycle, the week before there. Yeah. So we do eat a bit more during that time. Especially if you're tracking macros, you're like, oh man, I only have 2,000 calories for today and I'm freaking starving still, but last week I wasn't as hungry. Well, you know, we're working with your body. You can give yourself those few extra 100 calories and feel a bit better. So anyways, that's a tangent. But yes, your cycle and your body image can be linked. Not everyone, but it can be linked.
Okay. Very interesting. I'm gonna look up those studies after.
Yeah.
So I wanted to end on more of a personal note. So you have two daughters, and I'm always so curious, I guess, because everyone my age is kind of getting to the parenting stage of life. And something that I've thought about a lot also is do you have anything that you do to foster a body positive home, or like at least something where, I don't know, you're not, I guess how are you kind of shielding your daughters or trying to shield them from that diet culture world?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to navigate. And again, this can be, sorry, I don't know if you heard that. This can be applied to boys as well. Like, I know we focus a lot on girls, but there is a lot of emerging evidence that this affects boys too in different ways. And again, I'm not versed on male body image as much, so I don't want to touch on it, but it is something that is important too. Yep. So if you look at the influences of your body image, one of the major ones is obviously your familiar environment. And this is a lot of pressure on moms. And when I tell people this, I feel bad because then they're like, that's a lot of pressure. But it really can be like maternal, a mom's maternal body image and a mom's relationship with food is a huge driver of a child's relationship with food and a child's body image. Doesn't mean daddy or other partner doesn't have like the same influence, but that's just kind of like what we see.
But like you say, familiarity, your mom is the female and your bodies are more similar. And so you want to maybe mimic how she's eating.
Exactly. And, you know, traditionally, women are the ones that prepare the food and do the family dinners and stuff. And that's just traditional. Of course, things have changed. But some of this research is, you know, from the 80s and 90s and 2000s. Yeah. So things are always changing. So in terms of my daughters, I did the work for myself. Of course, I'm not perfect, but I'm very conscious of never talking about my body at least I try, and I'll try to catch myself, but not talking about my body in an aesthetic way, especially not its size. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, I look good, I feel good, you know, that kind of thing. Like, it's okay to comment on appearance in terms of like body image influence. But when you start like attaching like value and worth to the size, that's when the issue comes. So for example, you can say like, oh, you look great to someone. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. Like, we're human, appearance is important. But when you attach it to like the size of your body, like, hey, did you lose weight? You look great. That's when the kind of like, oh, you can only look good on this contingency, you know, type thing. So I try to steer away from that language or commenting on other people's bodies, like, mostly at all, other than the functional purpose of the body. Like, oh, did you see her arms? They were so strong doing that pull-up, like, for example. Right. Or I love when you were doing ballet. When you were on your toes, I was so impressed. You know, like, keeping the language like that, I'm super, super, like, conscious of. So I think that's really important. Also, showing my kids, like, my body. So trying to be comfortable in my bathing suit in front of them. Laughing about my rolls, showing them my cellulite and just being like, yeah, that's cellulite. Like, with it being like a really neutral thing. Like, it's neither good nor bad.
No negativity associated to it.
Yeah. It's just like cellulite exists. Like, belly rolls exist. Point final. There's nothing else to say. They're just like normal. Right. That type of a thing. In terms of relationship with food, that's a tough one. I really believe that children are really intuitive. So if they believe that dessert's not restricted, they're not going to go like ham on it, right? So the whole concept is like, offer your child, as a parent, you are kind of responsible for what you serve your kid, and they're responsible for how much they eat, whether that's more than you think they should or less than you think they should. Okay. So it's kind of like trusting your kid to be like, okay, this is the food that I have. I only want to eat like 2 bites of this and 5 bites of this. And as a parent, just having no comment about it. Being like, I trust you, because that's helping them develop trust with their own body. Like, okay, my mommy, like, I can have like 2 of this, 3 of that, plus dessert, and I feel good. And that's it. Like my parent isn't telling me to eat more bites or not have another portion because I'm still hungry. I can trust myself to kind of regulate that. So I try to do that as much as I can, but my kids, they're on opposite spectrums. I have my eldest daughter has like a crazy appetite. So of course my mind veers to when she's like, I want another hamburger. I'm like, I only had one. She wants another burger. And I'm like, simmer down. She trusts her own body. So I give her the burger and, she'll eat half, like when she's full.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my other daughter is like, I fight with her, like, just one more bite, just one more bite. And I try not to do that because, like, she's just not hungry, right?
Yeah.
So I try to cultivate that. And then discussions come up too because my 8-year-old is getting comments like about how big her feet are and, stuff like that. So she came home crying one day because her teeth are growing in and they're quite crooked. And I guess someone commented on her teeth. So that's when I use like, you might not like your teeth right now. You might not like your smile. But the good news is you're more than your smile and you're more than this. And then we start like talking about what else is she and other things that she likes. So crowds out that kind of like objectifying her mouth, right? So it's like, you are more than your mouth. So she's like, I like my eyes, I like my hair. And then her smile started coming back and the confidence starting back. So it's kind of like that, translating that with my clients. Oh, I hate my belly fat. So of course, when they look in the mirror, they zero in on their fat. And we call that objectification. Like you're self-objectifying yourself rather than looking at yourself as a person. And then when you do that to yourself, you tend to start doing that to other people. So let's say you haven't seen a friend in a long time. You zero in on the areas like, oh, is her belly bigger than mine or less than mine? And it's kind of that upward or downward comparison. So sometimes I work with clients to reduce that self-objectification. And oftentimes people body check. And I did that a lot. I would do the ab check. So there's a lot of different interventions you can do with like objectifying and like body checking and stuff like that. So I try not to let my kids see me body check too much or like get lost in the mirror, so to speak, because then they'll start doing it.
Okay.
And just talking to them about it, about body image and body functionality and what, of course, when it's kind of age appropriate.
Okay. And do you talk to them about just eating when they're full? Like, have you taught them anything or you're just okay.
No, like, so we've talked about it before. Like, so with my eldest, I'll say like, is your body telling you that you're hungry? And we've talked about like what that could look like for her.
Okay.
And she's like, yes, my body is telling me that I'm hungry. And so she'll actually use that language sometimes, which is super funny. And then, but my youngest, she's such a little shit. She'll be like, Mommy, my body is full and my body wants ice cream right now. And I'm like, so it's kind of hard to navigate that too, because what one kind of technique, like there's no blanket technique that works with all kids. Like some kids are just harder than others. So number one thing is trying to, instill proper nutrition, like liking all types of food. And it's okay not to like some types of food because as adults, we don't like all foods. Yes. And really like trusting like your body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps it up unless there is anything else that we hadn't commented on that you'd like to bring up or.
Let me just take a quick look. Maybe you have
no problem.
Other questions. I think we chatted about most of the kind of answers that I wanted to talk about. I feel like I talked about a lot.
Well, I feel like I'll probably want to have you on again another time to deep dive and even. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here. Oh. Yeah.
Sorry, the body image course that we're developing.
Oh, okay. Tell me.
Yeah, and I'll just talk about it briefly because I'm super passionate about it. So one of the women that I learned a lot about, she was one of the first women that I saw on social media doing that. Her name is Shannon Beer. She's actually really young, but she's so brilliant.
Okay.
And she just has such a great way of kind of synthesizing the body image literature, and I've learned so much from her. So through that connection, she developed a body image course for personal trainers. So interestingly, personal trainers report the highest weight stigma, which is crazy because they're supposed to be helping people be active, but they have the highest weight stigma. So what that means is they judge people by the size of their body in a negative way. So the larger they are, the more they like will have these like attributions like lazy and
Yes.
whatnot, which is like awful. And so she developed this course for them to learn about weight stigma, body image, and how they can kind of navigate.
So smart.
That it doesn't exist yet for people. It can exist for coaches, but not personal trainers. And it's also for any health practitioners. So dietitians, MDs, nurses, because actually MDs have really high weight stigma as well, like maybe higher than the regular population. And they've actually shown that with physiotherapists as well.
Okay.
So it's super, super important to educate those, health people who others look up to in these types of areas. So we're evaluating that empirically. We're going to be testing this among personal trainers and other health practitioners. They're going to take the course and we're going to evaluate them pre and post, and also evaluate their clients to see if they notice a difference in how they speak about body and how they coach after taking the course. And we're really hoping it's going to make a difference.
This is so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's really important.
I think about myself too. When I became a personal trainer, it was when I was in my 20s and deep into all of my, like I was saying, I was trying to replace my athletic mind to being very restrictive and calculated about diet and exercise and controlling that part of my life. And there's clearly a reason why I went there, like projecting my, like masking it as me helping people as my kind of obsession.
Yeah.
Not that that's what trainers do at all. I'm not saying that, but I just been thinking about myself personally and how there's easily a lot of like fat phobic messages in that world. And I was in that world, so I know.
I know it too. And just, someone who hasn't experienced a lot of weight stigma in these types of places, you think they're going to come back and try to get healthier? No, because they are shamed and they are judged. And you can just tell that by someone's language. By, for example, a personal trainer immediately assuming someone in a larger body is coming to them because they want to lose weight. Oh, so how much weight do you want to lose? Like would be one of their questions. And it's like, that's just crazy. What if they're coming to you because they just want to get stronger, improve their
deadlift, energized,
get more energy, or they're starting to get osteoporosis and they want to strengthen their bones? Like, why are you assuming that they want to lose weight? Like, that's just so just working on personal stuff like that with personal trainers, we're really hoping to make a difference in that and just improve the culture in general for anyone to come into the gym and receive that type of support.
That's so true. And I have a lot of fitness people in my world, and
of course
alternative world too. I don't want to get into the topic at all of the vaccines, but I saw that message a lot. Like, why should, somebody should have to lose weight before forcing me to get a vaccine because they're choosing to be unhealthy. Now you're forcing me to protect them. They need to take I remember I treated an acupuncturist and we were talking kind of about this subject and she was saying like, but who among us doesn't have any addiction? Not even necessarily, it's just people, if you dig deep enough, everyone's going to have their thing. I'm not even saying that everyone who's overweight has a food addiction. I'm not saying that, but you don't know what everyone is going through. And especially you can't base that on their appearance. And anyways, public health is difficult, but I saw a lot of those messages.
I know
over the last 2 years. And like, how do you not realize that that's a negative connotation that you're making to someone's weight?
And just assuming that someone is unhealthy because they're in a larger body. Like if you look at like football players or sumo wrestlers, like they're freaking in shape, more in shape than let's say like a runway model who smokes 10 packs a day, who is, has a poor relationship with food and anxiety and mental health. Like, why are you just assuming someone who is those assumptions don't help anyone? Yeah. And it's actually through the HAZE, like Health at Every Size movement, there's been a lot more research into the impact of weight stigma on health. And actually, it's not published yet. We're just in the middle of getting it published. We wrote a paper looking at health perception. So it was using actually data from Montreal, young adults, looking at um, their body shame and guilt, and how that related to their perceived mental and physical health, which is really interesting because the perception of your health, your physical health, if you just ask someone on a scale of 1 to 5, how healthy are you? Yes. It's usually highly correlated to actually their physiological health, that's another point. But
okay.
So we saw like what was a bigger contributor to the perception of your health? Your body shame and guilt or your BMI? And we saw that your body shame and guilt, which is measured using the basis, which is like a scale, was a bigger contributor than a person's actual measured BMI to how they perceive their health, which just goes to show that it's not your actual like size. It could be your experience of weight stigma and everything that goes along with that. That's actually contributing to your high blood pressure. That's actually contributing to all these negative health effects above and beyond the extra adipose that you might have. That's not to say that, adipose is healthy necessarily, having a surplus of that. Surplus, that's like so fun. But it's just to say that like weight stigma is a huge contributor to physical and mental health, and it shouldn't be discounted. And like having obesity is very multifaceted, and it's not just not having discipline. There's a lot of things contributing to your weight. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I deal with people who go through IVF also. And one of my patients, it really always stuck with me that she went to a few doctors, and the first thing that they would always say is, it's your weight, without running any tests, any markers, anything. And then she finally found a doctor who didn't lead with that and who ran all of the tests. And he said, absolutely, this is not related to your weight, because of XYZ. XYZ.
Like he found something.
And like there was something like genetic factors completely just unrelated, and it's just anyways.
That's weight stigma at its finest. And I've seen examples where people go in and they have an issue with their knee, and we'll just lose weight, it'll get better. And then whereas someone who was in like a more culturally like acceptable body would go in with a knee issue, I'll refer you out, maybe you need an ACL or MCL or whatever, and it's just like they don't get the care that they need. And then they're even too I've heard reports of like they don't even want to go to the doctor because they know that they're just going to be treated that way, so they don't get proper health care, and it's enraging. It's absolutely enraging.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that's why your course is amazing. And now I'm like, okay, we need to do another podcast to literally just talk about the presence of, your wording was better, but like the fat phobia in the medical community. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so just to reiterate, it's Shannon Beer's course, and you can go look it up. I highly recommend anyone to follow her on Instagram.
I'm going to go follow her now.
She's a brilliant young woman, and I've learned a lot from her. So
very, very interesting.
I know we're going past time and everything.
Okay, but how can people reach you if they'd like to work with you? And
so they can reach me at EKO, so Erin Kathleen O'Loughlin, EKO.coaching on Instagram, and I think it's the same thing on Facebook, but like who's on Facebook anymore, really? and I'm on Twitter. I think my handle's just like I can't even remember, Erin O'Loughlin. There's not that many, or O'Loughlin Erin.
Okay.
And I have a website, EKO Coaching, and there you go.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again so much for being here.
Thanks, Riley. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.